Well, this is the anchor piece for the show that's called Immaculate Debris. And my idea with this work, it's just begun from being curious about duplicate objects turning up over many years now, probably 25 years. Working with them in different ways. Of course, the first way you might begin is with a decorative approach, or some way, a reflective approach of these objects, looking at them based on different criteria like color, or the kind of object they are, or whatever it might be. But finally I arrived at the idea that they have meaning, and they have meaning in different combination. And when I came to that idea, I also began to realize that memory could be the central subject. In fact, it's not so much memory as it is forgetting. Because as you look at these things in different combination that produce different ideas in combination, you tend to favor one object over another. And if you go into a gallery, they say there's 20 seconds. That's the average time that someone spends looking at a painting or an object in a gallery. And that coincides also with your short-term memory, is about the same amount of time. So when you look at these things, you develop your own hierarchy of what you remember. And for me, more importantly, what you forget. So it's a gauge on how much we actually discard. All of these things have a certain historicity, they're all of a certain age, but they're all incredibly mundane, everyday objects. And so it's the kind of thing that you look at but you don't see. And it's something which, when put into a different circumstance, produces an idea. And perhaps you'll remember that versus another situation. So there's 300 objects on these 5 shelves. A lot of the content is also graphic and photographic. And what's interesting about the photographic elements are that it's analog photography. So here's a picture of John F. Kennedy lighting his cigar. But it's an object, it's a photograph as a physical object. It has chemistry, it is paper, and while digital technology replicates image, these not only are images, but they show the course of time. Each individual print is its own outcome of the chemistry and the time exposed. And so they too are objects as far as I'm concerned. They fit into the same category. And the various criteria, it's like endless criteria one can use in comparing the various objects to one another, whether it's the roundness of this hubcap with the oval shape of this card with, again, the round wheel on it. You're talking about a geometric form. But then you look at it again and it's wheels, and it's in the past, to something that's much, much more, under the radar and almost invisible as a floor tile and a square box that once held color slides. All these things exist around us, and we look at them, but we don't necessarily see them all the time. And that's what's very interesting to me, is to pull out the different forms of things that guide us through the everyday by looking at them and pulling them forward a little bit so we actually see them. So this shelf, if you look down the shelf, it's this mass of different things, this wall of things. And when you look at it at first, it seems as though they're all different things. You don't notice that replication going on right away. But once you start looking and once you start noticing that element, then the comparative ideas start happening. And behind us we have another rather noisy work, which is called Drive-By. It's another work which uses the template of the archive, and it's just clips of cars driving in and out of the frame, taken from old home movies that I purchased online. They're anonymous home movies, and they're that small moment when something happens that's, again, utterly anonymous, completely outside of the main focus, which would be the landscape. People on vacation, people witnessing the place they went to have their vacation and see what it was, and a car drives past and it's completely unknown to them, unnoticed. So I pulled all of the clips out for that purpose, but instead of just having, a video of each clip, I wanted to work with the context that you look at this particular archive with. And so I built this small shack out of cardboard that's 60 years old that I found. And I put a window at the very back. You could take a look inside and see what flies by next. I'm not sure what, but it gives some context to the work in which you view this collection of vehicles driving by. So it pushes it back, and the scale of the window far out exceeds the scale of the shack, and you have the push and the pull of looking closely at something and somehow being away from it at the same time. So that's Drive-By, and we come to the lens obstruction archive, another idea of collecting the anonymous, which I started again many years ago. I work really slowly and quite continuously with things. The beginnings of this project, you can see in this piece. These are all found photographs that have been enlarged and put together to form the end of a finger as if it points at the viewer. It's again a kind of collection of accident, and when combined, you don't really know what it is the central subject is, but by looking at each element, something begins to form. And after working through these initial works of just found photographs, I started to think a lot more about the idea of something that could be very well known, something that is popular, in other words, celebrity. And I moved on to this work, which is an extension of the project. And what I did was I collected original negatives and color transparencies. That some of them are candid and some of them are commercial, posed. And what I did was use that same element of what was a mistake and digitally entered the information, blocking the facial features of the subject to try and create some kind of border between knowing who we're looking at and never knowing who we're looking at. And so you have Marlene Dietrich on the right, you have the Brady bunch, you have the Pope, you have Nixon, you have Marilyn Monroe. These are also images from the past. And the amount of celebrity is is measured by, certainly by, to some extent, the age of the viewer, but it nevertheless, they're iconic, are iconic individuals. So it's it was interesting for me to try and make them closer to being anonymous. And the final work of the fourth of four works is a film, a video called The Great Ames Society. And this is a 22-minute film that's made up of, again, clips out of home movies, all silent, that I added Foley sound to, and we hired actors to lip sync what was being said. And the script, and it is a narrative, is based on what we perceived to be saying. We had to guess, but by stringing together various parts, we managed to make this melodramatic work that is like an artifact itself. It's as if, you know, one of the young people, one of the teenagers in the 1930s, because a lot of this is from the 1930s and 40s, has created the work for a school project. But you do very quickly become involved with the story, and it goes off in all directions. The central idea is a hunting accident, which is quite dark and quite dramatic, but the entire time the film turns over, it's always going off to the one side or the other, another idea, another person, all of the interconnectedness to the central person involved in the story. And it's perhaps an idea of being more like a folk object as film. It's not cinema. It's roughly made. It's painfully kind of honest. It has the elements of the period with it, and it's entertaining as well, I think. And so hopefully it's something that people will come and put the headphones on and take a listen to.